Hi class. So we're going to move on to chapter 5 now. And in this chapter, we're going to be talking more about school readiness. So that shift from preschool to elementary. And then we're also going to be talking more in depth about some of the specifics when it comes to industry versus inferiority. So the next stage of Erikson, and getting into some of the specifics like moral development and things like that. And then we'll end with the idea of encouragement and praise and how we should talk to children. Okay. So this is a quote that I really like that I think it comes from our textbook, and I think it kind of sums it up. Unfortunately, most schools expect the child to be ready for them. Schools should be ready for each child who comes. And I know that that is such a nuanced idea because on one hand, we need children to have certain skills to keep up with the pressure and demands of school, but we also need to be ready to meet them where they're at. It's not fair to them to think that they should be exactly where everybody else is. And it's a real drastic shift for young children when they move from preschool to elementary. And so we're going to look at some of that just so we can be aware of it and be more sensitive to that. So first, if we're looking across the different domains of development, we're going to think about socially. How do children need to adapt socially when they go from preschool to elementary school? Well, first off, the group size is very different. Many times preschoolers are in smaller groups. They have a teacher that's leading their small group. Even if they're part of a bigger group, they break out into those smaller groups frequently. And so they feel more connected to those individual group members as well as that teacher. And in kindergarten, they are one of 30. And they might have one teacher and one aide, or they might just have one teacher. And so they want to make that social connection like they had in preschool, but it's harder to do because that one teacher is dividing her attention or his attention in 30 different ways. They're going to have all new classmates. Many times where they go to preschool isn't zoned like elementary schools are. And so a lot of times they'll be meeting all new classmates for the first time. And there's so many new faces along with a new teacher. Like I said, there might be a teacher, there might be an aide. It just depends on what resources that school has. And it's a louder and chaotic environment. When it's time to move to new groups or to change, there's a lot more happening. Just trying to get to your cubby is like a little pit of activity that it's hard to get through. It can be very overwhelming for some children, especially because that's not what they're used to. The physical environment is very different as well. So it's a new environment typically. Now, sometimes there might be a preschool attached to an elementary school, and so that might make the transition easier. I know our elementary school has a preschool on site, so if you are in that district, you might just go on to kindergarten there and it would feel comfortable already. But a lot of times we'll have preschools that are small, more home-like settings. Some people run preschools in their home. And this feels smaller, more manageable, more cozy. Then you come to elementary school and boom, you look like you're walking into a big institution. Sometimes the elementary school, it just has so many more children coming in. Traffic around that area is much heavier. You can even have children going all the way to 8th grade. So for a kindergartner, seeing an 8th grader walk in, it's like an adult is there to them, right? The difference is so big. Your classroom will be different. You'll have less personal space as well. Again, that goes back to how many kids are in the classroom, and you know, you used to have, you know, your own chair and your own things in a preschool setting, and now you're going to have a little carpet square. Emotionally, this is hard. There's a longer separation from the family. So parent leaves, and might even drop you off at the bus in the morning, right? So now you've got a whole different way in which you're getting to school. You start by getting onto what feels new and different. You're responsible for getting off at the right time and things like that. You're gone more of the day. And then now there's this change in routine. And then the fact is, it's a very structured schedule. So while structure is good and routine is good for children, a kindergarten environment structure has very designated times for certain activities. And there's a lot less free play time. And that makes sense because they're a little bit older. They have to keep on a schedule that also fits in with the rest of the elementary school, but also because there's so many kids in the classroom, to have free play time would just mean potentially a total chaotic mess that then would take so much time to clean up. It wouldn't use that time productively. And so it's this constant balance of trying to figure out, you know, how to support these young kids, and also the freedom that they need balanced with the structure that they need. Cognitively, they're going through a shift as well. So they're on that cusp of autonomy versus shame and doubt into, or, you know, initiative versus guilt into industry versus inferiority. So a lot of kindergartners are now starting kindergarten closer to 6, and that's about the time where we see that developmental shift. And so they're kind of cognitively going through that shift as well. The structured schedule can be helpful, but again, it also doesn't always allow for the break that they might need mentally, just to stop thinking about the same thing. Or if they are having, or we're used to the flexibility of being able to kind of emotionally regulate themselves. And like we talked about in chapter 4, having that ability to move to another environment where they feel more secluded, or where maybe there's more quiet play opportunities, they may not get that now, right? Now it's like, you have to do this, and then the next thing you have to do this, and you need to be on task. And so, I'm sorry, why are you over in that area right now? We need you to come back and work on this math practice. And for some kids, that is really tough on them. Those academic standards can lead to mental exhaustion. Mental exhaustion leads to the inability to regulate your emotions. And so it can be very, very challenging, right? We went from kind of creative activities for play and learning to worksheets. And for some kids, that's just a hard switch that hopefully with the right kindergarten teacher, with the right support, they're making that shift more gradually. And so in the beginning of the year, hopefully there is more free play. If you need to move away, times that's allowed. But eventually they're going to need to get to a point where they're working on what that time is allotted for, really because they need to maximize their time in order to stay up with the academic demands. And it's again, this constant balance of what that child needs, what that teacher needs to get through in terms of material, and how to manage all of that. Okay, so we're going to move into Erikson's industry versus inferiority stage. This is where, again, you know, a lot of kindergartners and preschoolers are right on that cusp. Sometimes they're 5, almost 6, or sometimes already 6 when they go into kindergarten. And so they are hitting this developmental shift from the previous stage to this one right at the time of kindergarten. So it's important that we understand, especially if you're thinking about working with TK, older preschool, or kindergartners, what this stage is about. See if this will work.
Okay, so it turns out not all laptops are created equal.
Now we'll start it. There we go. Okay, so that just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of kind of what they are working through with industry versus inferiority. Some other things just to think about with that is that's that 6 to 10 year age range, or 6 to 12. And the idea of industry, right, that really means, comes from the word industrious, which is like a hardworking, goal-oriented. And so children are wanting, right? So it's not all bad that school shifts like it does, because children are wanting some of those challenges. But in the environment that's not supportive to understanding that they're going through that developmental shift, that's when inferiority can creep in. And that's where you're not feeling good enough, where you start comparing yourselves to others. You feel like you always come up short. And so what we want in that critical stage of development is we want children to really develop how they're going to feel about starting school, and really find it exciting, find the challenge interesting. We don't want them just to keep playing with blocks, right? We need them to be challenged somewhat so they learn how to reach certain goals, how to do hard work. We want them to be successful at learning skills that they're going to need, that's going to take them in their life. But we also want to give them the right feedback that lets them know it's still okay to make mistakes, that everybody's learning, and that everybody's different. Some people are going to catch on really quickly, and others it's going to take more time. But the important thing is we're all going to get there together. And so the right kind of feedback the right kind of encouragement is really critical during this stage. And we're going to kind of move into some of that right now. I've got a couple more videos. This one is a little video heavy in this lecture. But the first thing I want to talk about are morals. And so school-age children are really dealing with a lot of moral decision making. Is something right? Is something wrong? And they have a very specific kind of concrete way of thinking about it. Most of the time, if something breaks a rule, they say it's wrong, even if we can see multiple perspectives. So rules and standards are set by the adults. Children feel like those are very concrete or black and white, and they don't always consciously ask themselves this question, but a lot of times when they're thinking about decisions, they will think, am I going to get punished for this? So that will determine whether they choose to do it or not, or am I going to be rewarded for this, right? So it's still a little bit of that egocentric kind of feelings that they're having, where they're kind of just worried about their own outcome when they're making decisions. But sometimes they'll also ask, will this make someone I care about happy? And so they're trying to please other people too. And so there's this balance going on of, is this good for me? Is it bad for me? Does it help someone that I care about? But they do have a very black and white thought process when it comes to making right or wrong moral decisions. And there is a scenario called the Heinz scenario that's part of Kohlberg's theory of moral development. So we're going to look at Kohlberg's theory of moral development, and then we're going to look at the Heinz scenario. You have a chart in Canvas. It's on the homepage, or not the homepage, the modules page. It's the very bottom module, and it is a chart of different theorists and within child development. And so Kohlberg is one of those, that there's a chart linked there on his theory of moral development, along with Erikson, along with, I think, Vygotsky's on there, and other ones that we've talked about.
Hi, it's Stacey Abrams. There is a huge fundraising deadline coming up for Senate Democrats.
I'm not getting political here.
Lawrence Kohlberg's theory claims...
Oops. Oh, guys, so sorry. Let me bring this back to the beginning here. Okay.
Lawrence Kohlberg's theory claims that our development of moral reasoning happens in 6 stages. The stages themselves are structured in 3 levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. To understand this better, imagine a conflict at school. There is a fight in the schoolyard. 2 ninth graders are beating up Tom. Those who watch the fight are at different stages of moral development. Let's see what they do and how they justify their behavior. At stage 1, we make moral judgments based on obedience and punishment. Finn's sense of good or bad is directly linked to whether he gets punished or not. Finn sees what is happening to his friend and wants to help, but he doesn't because he is afraid the teacher may punish him if he gets caught fighting. He asks himself, how can I avoid punishment? At stage 2, we are motivated by self-interest. Mary decides to intervene and help Tom. She knows that she might get punished, but she also knows that she could become a victim herself someday. If she helps Tom now, he might help her in the future. She is asking herself, what's in it for me? At stage 3, interpersonal accord and conformity guide our moral judgment. Betty sees the fight and wants to intervene, but when she realizes that all the others are just watching, she decides not to get involved. She wants others to see that she is a good girl who is conforming with the ethics of the community. She asks herself, What do others think of me? At stage 4, we value authority and want to maintain social order. When the teacher sees the group fighting, he immediately steps in and shouts, "Stop! Fighting at school is forbidden." He feels that, above all, it is important to follow the rules, otherwise chaos breaks out. He feels it is his duty to uphold the rules that sustain a functioning society. He asks himself, how can I maintain law and order? At stage 5, we understand rules as a social contract, as opposed to a strict order. Jessie, who watches from afar, is not sure how she feels about this. To her, rules make sense only if they serve the right purpose. Obviously, the school rules prohibit fighting, but maybe Tom deserves to finally learn his lesson. Just yesterday, he punched a young girl from grade 1. She asks herself, does a rule truly serve all members of the community? At stage 6, we are guided by universal ethical principles. All those involved now have to face the headmaster. He first explains the school rules and why they exist. He then clarifies that rules are valid only if they are grounded in justice. The commitment to justice carries with it an obligation to disobey unjust rules. The headmaster's highest moral principle is compassion. He believes that all people should learn to understand each other's viewpoints and that they don't feel alone with their feelings. He asks, what are the abstract ethical principles that serve my understandings of justice? At the pre-conventional level, Finn is driven by fear and Mary by self-interest. Both judge what is right or wrong by the direct consequences they expect for themselves and not by social norms. This form of reasoning is common among children. At the conventional level, Betty responds to peer pressure, and the teacher follows the rules. Their morality is centered around what society regards as right. At this level, the fairness of rules is seldom questioned. It is common to think like this during adolescence and adulthood. At the post-conventional level, Jessie knows that things are complicated because individuals may disobey rules inconsistent with their own morality. The headmaster follows a universal ethical idea, at complete disconnect with what society thinks or the rules say. To him, everything is solved through compassion. The right behavior, in his opinion, is therefore never a means to an end, but always an end in itself. Not every person reaches this level. The American psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg based his work on Piaget's theory of cognitive development. In order to confirm his theory of stages of moral development, Kohlberg interviewed boys between the ages of 10 and 16. He analyzed how they would justify their decision when confronted with different hypothetical moral dilemmas.
Okay, so we are going to look at that now and actually hear some children's responses, and it's called the Heinz scenario. And so they'll present the scenario and then we'll hear what children think at different stages from their own mouths. Sorry guys, what's happening here? There we go.
The basis of children's reasoning and judgments about moral decisions changes over time. Children between the ages of 6 and 10 tend to judge acts as unilaterally right or wrong, focusing on rules and consequences. Intentions are often neglected.
I'm going to read you a story now, and then I'm going to ask you some questions after I read the story, okay? Are you ready? Okay. In Europe, a woman was dying from a special kind of cancer. In the same town where the woman and her husband Heinz lived, a druggist had discovered a possible cure. But the medicine cost much more than the woman or her husband could afford. So Heinz, the sick woman's husband, then borrowed all the money he could, but still only had half of what he needed. Heinz told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell the drug cheaper or to let him pay later. The druggist replied, "No, I discovered the drug and I'm going to make money from it." Heinz then became desperate and broke into the store to steal the drug for his wife. Should Heinz have stolen the drug? Nope.
decisions at this age are made at the pre-conventional or conventional level and reflect either a punishment-reward orientation or the desire to obey rules and conform to social norms.
Why is it wrong? Because you never know if somebody's hiding where police are close, and there are maybe police or spies sneak in there. Because stealing could turn you into a criminal. Because you might get caught, you'll be sent to jail. Even though she was going to die, but doesn't anyone like to steal? No, even though that his wife was in desperate need, she doesn't like to steal.
In middle childhood, children are only beginning to question the absolute nature of laws and rules and consider the impact of intentions on moral decisions.
Was it actually right or wrong to have stolen the drug? I can see why he would do it, but I don't think it's right. Well, it wasn't okay, like, lawfully, but, like, it's better than somebody dying. I would say yes, because he probably cares about his wife a lot, and he doesn't want her to die, anything, and I would say no, because it's not right to steal.
Okay, so you can see how that has different examples of, at those different ages, right? Closer to 6, how everything was very black and white, and then closer to 10, 12, right? They can start to see both sides. And so we can see that shift in reasoning happening, and how they would make decisions based on those morals, evolving over this time span. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about adult attention and the idea of pro-social behaviors. And this really comes from the idea that it is more helpful to give attention to the behaviors that we want to see from young children. And this is hard, guys. This is so hard because it's the negative attention that we a lot of times end up giving more to. But for some kids, they like attention, whether it's positive or negative. And so the idea of encouraging those pro-social behaviors means that we're responding to children when they have the behaviors that we want to see. So an example could be a young child saying, "More milk," demanding it. And you don't respond, right? And then they wonder why you're not responding. And then it kind of clicks, "Oh, please, may I have more milk?" And then you respond, right? So, and they get more milk, and that's the reward, is that you're responding for when they behave in a way that's more socially acceptable. Or things that we see them do. So when we're being observant teachers, we want to comment on the children that we like, or not that we like, but comment on the children's behaviors that we like to see more of. And so we might say, "Wow, Johnny, you really know how to share well with your toys. Thanks for including little Sally in your play right now." Or, teachers do this all the time. "Oh, I like how Sally's sitting crisscross applesauce with her mouth closed." And so other children start to do it because they want the teacher to acknowledge them too. And then she does and says, "Oh, and I like how Jenny's doing that. And I like how Mary's doing that." And it becomes a domino effect of pro-social behavior that we want to see from kids because we're giving them the attention for the behaviors that we want to see from them. Your book has a great box on page 120. It's a strategy box 5.2 on page 120, and it has lots of different ways in which we can encourage pro-social behaviors. We are not going to cover them all in this lecture, but just a few, right, that are important to point out. Model them yourself. right? Children are sponges and they're always watching us. And so if we want them to act a certain way or talk a certain way, we need to be doing that to them too. If you're responding with sarcasm and annoyance and impatience, that's probably how they're going to treat you or treat other children in the environment. Explain why you're setting the limits. This is a great one. Children do not want to constantly be told what to do, right? They're already going to feel that way to some degree. Like we talked about in the previous chapter, children wanting more control. And sometimes when we just bark out orders at them, hey, stop running, don't do that, they don't always know why, right? Because they aren't thinking ahead to what can happen if they keep doing that action. They're just like, why are you telling me what to do all the time? And it's annoying. But if you go to them, you get down on their level, hey, I noticed when you're running that there's not a lot of space here, and I'm worried you're going to run into another child and that you or that child or both of you are going to get hurt. And so when we're in the classroom, we really need to walk to be more careful. Please help me with that, right? And that's something that they can be more receptive to. Now, does that mean they're going to do that from now on? No, of course not. They're going to need reminders, but they're going to need those same types of reminders where, hey, do you remember why we don't run in the class? And then they'll go, oh yeah, we don't want anybody to get hurt, right? So then they'll start to remember themselves the why behind what they're doing. And if you know the why behind what you're doing, you're more likely to do it. Okay. I think, there's 10, 12 of these. Giving choices, that's always helpful. Again, it comes back to control. Children want control over their environment. So if you're finding that a child is not showing you those pro-social behaviors that you're hoping to see, try offering them more choices and letting them feel like they have more control. That can be really helpful as well. Okay, here's our last little video for the day. Let's look at this.
Our team realizes that building friendships amongst the students is really important. During planning time, we plan specific activities to be practiced during circle, one of which is we pick a student to pass out the materials, allowing them to have a social interaction with each child. At the beginning of the maze time, I choose 2 students, giving each one a marker. They do the maze and then they go and tap a student and tell them that it's their turn to get to do the maze next. Another example would be right before center time, I choose a student to go ask a peer to play with them during centers. Practicing social interactions helps to develop friendships.
All right, so that little video was just a quick demonstration of how to encourage pro-social behavior amongst the children themselves within a preschool environment. So giving them opportunities we saw for choice, we saw for getting to choose a partner, pick a friend, learning how to make those social interactions pleasant, and the teachers cognitively and consciously trying to bring those opportunities for the child. Again, when we talked about environment last time, this is another way to set up the environment. This is more of a curriculum structure, but the way of setting up the environment so that children have those opportunities for pro-social behavior between each other is really important. And then lastly, positive affirmations. There is a quote, and I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it's something like, the way we talk to children will become their inner voice. And this is really true, but it's also true of ourselves. Positive affirmations really help us to, it just changes our mindset, right? We naturally, as humans, go to the negative almost all the time. And so reframing our situation, building ourselves up, right? This is important for us to do for young children. But the reality is that if you aren't doing it for yourself and feeling good about yourself, you can't go to a school environment and give that to young children, or give it to your kids at home, or be a positive person in other people's lives, even within your families or your friendships. And so positive affirmations is something that you're going to dig into deeper in the discussion this week. And I hope that it really helps you. It's going to be some self-reflection that I want you to do. But again, if we're not doing that for ourselves, it's really hard to then give it to other people. And so that's why it's really important to think about that. And you will during your discussion. Okay, our last topic here that I want to cover is empty praise versus encouragement. One of the really important things, especially about this stage of development, is not just setting children up to be people pleasers. Of course, it's important to learn to take other people's perspectives into consideration, to want to do kind things for other people. We're not talking about squashing generosity or the ability to have multiple perspectives and to understand other people. What we are talking about is not just creating children to please adults. Always doing something just to please someone else can have really unfortunate consequences in adulthood. So if we set children up to do that now, they're going to seek out that in relationships later on when they're adults, in their work life. Their friendships are going to be very one-sided because they're always going to be the ones giving but not receiving. And so what we want to do is we want to speak to children about themselves, about their work, based on characteristics that we want to develop in them. So it's not just about pleasing others, right? So if we have a scenario where this child brings this Lego creation to us, a lot of times our first response would be, oh, I love it. It's so great. I love cars. And that sounds nice, right? And that might be something that is very pleasing for a child to hear. They want to hear a lot of times that you love it. But honestly, who cares if you love it, right? The child made this with their own creation and creative mind. That's the important part. They made it for their own enjoyment. Most likely they weren't thinking, I wonder what teacher so-and-so is going to think about this. Now, even though they want to go show you, it's not always that they're wanting your praise. They want you to build up the attributes that it took to make that creation. So something that you could say, because we want to develop their critical thinking skills. So you could respond by, wow, tell me how you made this. And then they're going to tell you. And then you're going to say, that sounds like you put a lot of thought into that. I'm really glad. Or don't say I'm really glad. See, it's so easy to do. But you could say, you really put a lot of thought into it. It sounds like you really had a specific design in mind and you worked at it till you got it, right? Those are things that we want to say because we want to develop their ability to think critically. We want to develop their creativity. We want to develop their perseverance in that. We also want to develop, like I said, perseverance. So it looks like you worked hard on this. Did it take you a long time, right? You're asking questions of interest, but it's not about how you feel about it. Because honestly, that doesn't matter. And even if they seem like they want that information, it's not really what they want. Or again, their creativity. Wow, this is so unique. Tell me about your design. You didn't even use the instructions. You made up your own creation. So these are ways that we can talk to kids because it's important that we really want, again, to encourage the attributes that we're looking for. We want them to be critical thinkers. We want them to persevere. We want them to be creative. If then they take this truck and they share it with a friend to play with, how nice of you. That was so kind of you to share something special that you made with a friend, right? We want them to develop kindness and sharing. Those are attributes. It's not just, yes, I love it, it's great, and then you move on to the next thing. That's just empty praise that doesn't build them up further. Again, it's also really important that when we offer our encouragement, we're not offering labels. This can be tough as well, but we don't want to say things like, you are so smart, or you are just, that's just the perfect design. Because again, it's not about being perfect. It's not about being smart even. It's what attributes are we looking at that we want to encourage and that we want to develop those characteristics in that child. Okay, so that wraps up chapter 5. Again, go back and make sure you do your discussion to think more about positive affirmations and how those are effective in your life so that you can share those with others. I believe this discussion on positive affirmations has a little bit of a lengthy article attached. The idea is not for you to memorize that article or read it in every little detail. It's really just get a general idea about it, pick out some parts that kind of really speak to you, and then respond to your discussion that way. So don't feel overwhelmed at the length of the article. The point, again, is not to read it in specific detail, but more just take some of the sections in, get the general understanding of it, and use that as part of your discussion posts and replies to your classmates.